This is Power Hour with Gabriella Power.
Hello and welcome to Power Hour. I'm Gabriella Power. Thank you for your company. Let's start by checking in on the mainstream media because right now, left-wing media outlets are having a meltdown. Why? Because Donald Trump has accepted a small number of refugees from South Africa. This week, the Trump administration granted 59 white South Africans refugee status because they're victims of government-sponsored racial discrimination in their homeland, according to the White House. This is what President Donald Trump had to say.
White farmers are being brutally killed and their land is being confiscated in South Africa. And the newspapers and the media, television media doesn't even talk about it. If it were the other way around, they'd talk about it. That would be the only story they'd talk about.
So the Trump administration has granted refugee status to these 59 men, women and children because there have been a spate of murders of farmers in South Africa. And yet the same mainstream media outlets that seem to have no problem with Joe Biden's open border policy that allowed almost 10 million illegals to cross the border, including some on a terror watch list, suddenly have an issue with these 59 refugees from South Africa being granted asylum in the US. This is some of what went to air on MSNBC's panel, where nearly every commentator sounded devastated that America was taking in these men, women and children. And one guest even suggested that the situation in South Africa isn't that serious because, quote, only a small handful of white farmers have been murdered.
There's just been a small handful of farmers that have been killed over the past 10 years. No land has actually been expropriated. So it's just a farce and a sham and a moral ugliness.
Only a handful. In recent years, there have been 300 farm attacks and at least 50 murders. Not that any amount should be okay. But the hysteria does not stop there on MSNBC. Here is their political analyst, Donna Edwards, suggesting that Donald Trump is only doing this because he's racist.
Well, in my view, what makes it different is that they are white South Africans. The president, in my view, has not hidden his racism behind a bushel. In fact, in his policies, whether it's removing government workers or, in this case, admitting white South Africans while denying refugee status, asylum seekers from other countries, principally Central and South American and Black nations to come into this country. And so I think that, this policy, while it's not surprising in this action, really speaks of the underlying message in this that disrespects and shows disdain for people of color.
On Monday, the 59 refugees arrived in the United States and many held up USA flags and posters thanking President Donald Trump. And this MSNBC reporter will tell you that it is appalling to suggest that these people would likely assimilate in America. And this reporter even went so far to suggest that there is no race-based violence in South Africa.
The Trump administration, they're saying that essentially these white South Africans assimilate better and they're also not as much of a security risk. That's really causing a lot of people to be appalled, frankly. And I also should tell people that this violence that they're talking about that are dealing with these Afrikaners, I've been hearing from people that say there is violence in South Africa, but it's affecting everybody of every single race, Katie.
Once again, the mainstream media in meltdown. They're not just up to their old tricks, but they're straight up lying to you. Joining us now is Chief Economist at the Institute of Public Affairs, Adam Crichton. Adam, thank you so much for joining us. I want to get your thoughts on the media's reaction to the Trump administration's decision to welcome a group of 59 white South African refugees because they are facing violence and discrimination at home. Now, the left-wing media seem to be panicking about this, and there were even suggestions on Don Lemon's podcast that farmers that are coming in could be replacing farmers here in America. Take a listen to this.
The white Afrikaners who were allowed into the country and what that means for the Black folks and the Black farmers, what's going to end up, and the Black farmers who've lost so much land over the decades here in the United States because of the racist policies. What does this do? What does this mean? When you see this, what do you think?
Well, Don, this is a slap in the face to America's Black farmers right now. Here you have the President of the United States flying in white farmers
And it's not just on that podcast, on outlets like MSNBC. There's just so much of that type of language getting thrown out there. It seems that there's a bit of a double standard here. There were no problems when there was Joe Biden's open border policy, letting in millions of illegals crossing the border. But now that we have 59 refugees from South Africa, well, that's alarming.
Yeah, look, it is just hilarious. As you say, there've been at least 5 million migrants pour into the United States during the Biden administration, depending on what figures you look at, and the left largely celebrated that in the US. They certainly didn't complain, and it just is laughable that these 59 white farmers from South Africa, which I understand have been granted refugee status, will be allowed in the US, and they do suffer persecution, as I understand it, back in South Africa. So I think it's perfectly valid of the US to let them in. I mean, I think probably the left's angry about it because these 59 farmers probably would end up voting for the Republican Party if they ever became US citizens. And, maybe this is too cynical, but I think the reason the left generally likes huge amounts of immigration is because those immigrants tend to support the Democrat Party eventually.
Yeah, it's a very valid point. Look, I want to talk to you about the trade war. Right now, global stock markets are soaring in the wake of the trade truce between the US and China. Now, the agreement implements a 90-day cooling off period, bringing a temporary end to the trade war. So US tariffs on Chinese imports, which were jacked up to 145% last month, will be scaled down to 30%, and Beijing lowered its tariffs from 125% to just 10%. Now, this is what Donald Trump has had to say about dealing with China.
One of the things I think that could be most exciting for us and also for China is that we're trying to open up China because, as you know, many years ago we opened up the USA. Now it's time for China to open up, and that's part of our deal. And we're going to open up China. To me, that's the most exciting part. But yeah, we made a deal. The relationship is very good. I've always had a good relationship with President Xi. It was interrupted because of COVID, obviously. But outside of that, I've always had a great relationship, a lot of respect for him. And we'll see how that all works out. But we have the confines of a very, very strong deal with China. But the most exciting part of the deal, it was mentioned, but we don't talk about it yet. That's the opening up of China to U.S. business. And that would be like opening up a whole new world. And I think it would be even better for China.
Adam, what's your assessment of where this is at the moment?
Well, look, I think the fact that there's a deal is fantastic. OK, it's only 90 days, but if you go back a month or so, I think most commentators thought the world was practically going to end with all the discussion of the tariffs. But both the Chinese and the Americans have been sensible and pragmatic, and they've reduced those tariffs from, as you say, 3 figures to 2 figures. I think 30% tariffs now on Chinese goods going into the US and 20% the other way. So they are significantly higher, but obviously much, much lower. And trade will continue between the two countries. This is great for Australia too, of course, because China obviously buys a lot of our exports, and things that are bad for the Chinese economy are certainly bad for the Australian economy too. So we should celebrate that here. But the point that Trump makes there is broadly right. The US has been fairly conducive to free trade for a very long time, and other countries are not. The places like China and also the European Union have imposed a whole array of tariff and non-tariff barriers on American goods. And so the US president, has every right to be frustrated by those and to seek their removal.
And as you say, just a month ago, it was as if the world was ending. And it's always good to have your perspective here on Power Hour, because so much of the mainstream media were freaking out.
I was right.
That's right. Is it too early to say you were right? Look, let's just go back 4 weeks and look at some of the headlines and the messages that we were being told. In The Economist, that had the headline, President Trump's mindless tariffs will cause economic havoc. And if you listen to the Democrats, well, this is what Elizabeth Warren claimed would happen to the economy.
Comes in and basically starts the dumbest trade war in the history of this country. This is going to be about potentially millions of people losing their jobs. It's going to be about millions of people losing their savings, many of people losing their retirement security, and at the same time taking on even higher costs for everything they buy. So that's going to push us in potentially to foreclosures or people being pushed out of their apartments. I remember this from 2008. and how long it took us to dig our way out. And to this day, there are families, there are communities that still haven't recovered. Recessions can be all those fancy charts and graphs, but at the end of the day, people feel them one person at a time, and they can be devastating.
Adam, and in just a matter of weeks, we've seen the stock market recover. We've seen a deal being done. You know, you were right.
Yeah, look, the jobless rate in the US is still very low, as I understand it, below 5%, I think. As you say, the stock market's been booming again. Look, it's early days. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I mean, clearly forecasts like that have just been proved hopelessly wrong so far. I mean, as a general rule, things are never quite as bad or good as they seem. That's kind of my philosophy in life. So, you know, when you see hysteria, it's probably misplaced. And we certainly saw a lot of that in relation to these deals. So, look, let's just wait and see. It's not only the US and China that have a deal. The US and the UK have a deal, I understand. So I think what we're going to see see US tariffs settle around the 10 to 30% mark on most countries, and it's going to be effectively a revenue raiser for the US government. And they may use some of that revenue to try to cut income taxes. We have to wait and see. But look, it's not going to be as disastrous as some people thought.
Oh, great to have your perspective as always. And look, also let's talk about US inflation data that is in. Inflation was softer than expected in April, slowing to its lowest rate in more than 4 years. The consumer prices rose 2.3% in April from a year earlier, which is the lowest annual inflation reading since 2021. Now, this has sparked a fresh push, I guess, from President Trump to see interest rates slashed. What do you make of it?
Well, look, firstly, this is quite funny too, because that was the month where the huge tariffs came in and inflation was supposed to explode, but actually inflation went down. So it's kind of funny, right? So inflation is basically in the US where it should be, between 2 and 3%. There's no worrying signs yet. You know, Trump, for all of his life, all of his career, has always been for lower interest rates, and he likes to badger the Fed to lower rates. You know, that is ultimately up to the Fed in the US, just like it's up to the RBA here to change interest rates independently. So we'll just wait and see what they do. They will probably cut them, I would say. Central banks have a proclivity, basically an inclination to cut rates when they can. And if there's no inflation, they will typically cut them. So when the US cuts, we'll probably see cuts here in Australia too. So that's good. Okay. With home loans.
Absolutely. Finally, I want to get your thoughts on Donald Trump's trip to the Middle East. We've seen Saudi Arabia commit to investing $600 billion in the US in a deal that's set to strengthen America's energy, security, defence industry and access to global infrastructure. Qatar Airways has signed a deal worth more than $200 billion for the purchase of more than 150 Boeing jets. Now, the president has celebrated the deal as the biggest in Boeing's history. You know, what's your assessment of the president's tour in the Middle East and the deals that he's been able to do?
Well, these deals are great for US corporations. I mean, he thinks of himself as a great deal maker, and he's made some great deals here. I think the more general point is it's good that he's visiting these Arabic countries. I mean, he's visiting the president of Syria. These were largely no-go zones for previous presidents, but he's being very pragmatic, I think, in world affairs. He's dealing with Israel, he's dealing with the Arab countries, he's dealing with Russia, he's dealing with Ukraine. I mean, he wants to be a peace president, I think, and I think that it's good that he's out there meeting people. From what I hear, Trump in person is very personable and likable, and I think that's worked in Saudi Arabia. You can see it.
Adam Crichton, Chief Economist at the Institute of Public Affairs. Thank you so much for your time. Love having you on Power Hour.
Thanks for having me.
President Donald Trump is right now touring the Middle East. He arrived in Saudi Arabia on Tuesday, where he secured major deals. He signed a strategic economic partnership with Saudi Arabia for energy, defence, mining and space-based agreements that total $600 billion. Now, Donald Trump also says that this deal could lead to the creation of 2 million jobs in the US. Joining us now is independent journalist Brittany Hopper. Brittany, it's great to see you again. Let's talk about this trip in the Middle East. Donald Trump also announced that he'd be lifting sanctions on Syria, offering Syria a chance for greatness, in his words. And during his speech in Saudi Arabia, the president insisted that he is a peacemaker and a unifier. Let's take a listen.
As I said in my inaugural address, my greatest hope is to be a peacemaker and to be a unifier. I don't like war. We have the greatest military, by the way, in the history of the world. I rebuilt our military in my first 4 years and rebuilt it into the most powerful military there is. And you saw that when I knocked out ISIS in 3 weeks.
The president has now touched down in Qatar, and the Qataris rolled out the red carpet for 47. He was greeted by local leaders and joined a Qatari state dinner. And Donald Trump signed a series of agreements there, including a huge deal which will see Qatar Airways buying more than 150 aircraft from Boeing. This is their largest order ever, and Qatar Airways is spending more than $200 billion on it. So, Brittany, looking at what Donald Trump has been able to achieve in the Middle East, it seems pretty extraordinary in such a short period of time. What do you make of it all?
You know, I don't even know what to make of it. I have mixed emotions and feelings about this because I am a proud Jewish Zionist. And, you know, we know that Qatar is one of the major funds for Hamas. At the same time, it's known I voted for Trump. I am a pro-Trumper. But I do think that we have not seen a president, an American president, come together like this with folks in the Middle East to try and bring peace. And so it gives me hope. And I'm hopeful that we might reach a point that there can be some peace within this region, because I think no matter what, whether you're a Jewish Zionist, whether you are a Palestinian, whether you're a Muslim, whether you're whatever you are, Christian, whatever you may be, I think at this point, everyone around the world wants peace in this region. Absolutely. So perhaps Trump will help with that. He is certainly doing a lot more than we've seen any other past presidents do. So I will give him a lot of credit with that.
Well, Donald Trump says that he wants to strike a deal with Iran amid ongoing nuclear talks, but will cripple Iran's economy if it rejects this olive branch. Let's just take a listen to what Donald Trump's had to say.
I'm all for Iran. I want them to have a wonderful country and make a lot of money. They have great oil reserves. But if you remember, when I was president, Iran was broke because I placed secondary sanctions, meaning you couldn't buy, if you bought oil, you couldn't deal with the United States. And people make a lot of money dealing with the United States. So basically, they weren't selling any oil to almost anybody. It was down to a trickle, almost nothing. And by the time it all came about, after a couple of years, they had no money. And they didn't have money for Hamas, they didn't have money for Hezbollah, they didn't have any money at all. And we had no threat. And when Biden came in, he took off the sanctions and he let them get very rich. And now they have $350 billion or more.
Trump calls Iran the most destructive force in the Middle East and blames the regime for instability across the region. Brittany, can I get your reaction to his comments on Hannity?
I mean, Trump is completely right. Everything that Trump does, there's always a reason behind it, and a very calculated reason. So I have to believe that this is all for a reason, even accepting the jet that he accepted. And I think it's left a lot of us like, huh? So, extending this olive branch to Iran, we just have to see. I think there's more questions than answers right now, and I really truly feel that Trump is trying to have everyone's best interest here, and the ultimate goal is peace, while maintaining Israel's existence, having Israel's back as well. So I have to believe that all of this is just happening for a reason, and it's for the greater good of bringing peace in the region over there. Iran cannot get nuclear weapons. We know this, and Trump knows this, and Trump said it perfectly on Hannity. So we know this. When Trump was in Qatar, he also mentioned how, the Arab nations around need to condemn the massacre that happened in Israel on October 7th, 2023. So, we're seeing talks that we've never really heard before in a really long time, at least. So that's hopefully moving in the right direction to try and get everyone kind of in line here. And I have to give Trump credit because he's the one who's kind of trailblazing this. Let's just hope that everyone's on board.
And there was some good news this week with the return of hostage Eden Alexander. Thousands of people from New Jersey welcomed home the former Hamas hostage Eden Alexander after his release. He, of course, spent more than 580 days in Gaza held by Hamas terrorists. And of course, Brittany, we continue to pray for the remaining hostages, but this is no doubt welcome and such emotional news.
Yeah, I mean, it was so beautiful to see it but it also just kind of gives us the harsh reality that there's still hostages over there that were brutally kidnapped, many of who have been killed. It's why we're at war. It's why Israel's at war, unfortunately. One must ask, though, can you just give the hostages back, and can we just get this war over with? I think everyone wants this war to be done, but it just shows the brutal truth that, Hamas, the internationally declared manifesto terrorist organization in the world, is still terrorizing Israel and has hostages with them. But what a beautiful reunion. You can see on the video just the mother-son reunion. I don't really know any other nation and religion and people in the world who come together in solidarity like the Israelis and the Jewish people do when it comes to our own. We all feel this, and I don't even think you have to be Jewish or Israeli to really feel this connection and to understand how beautiful it is to see these reunions when we see Hamas, these deals made and the hostages are released. But hopefully, look, as a Jewish Zionist, from my ears to yours, I want this war over as much as everyone else in this world wants.
Yeah, well said. And those scenes, watching the vision of the hugs between the mother and the son, it's so heartwarming. We know Eden Alexander and many of the other hostages shouldn't have spent a day away from their families, but there's some good news as we are seeing some of them, one now, return. Brittany, I want to talk to you about what is going on in the United States, a bit of politics, and we have to talk about the mainstream media, because we've spoken about before how biased it can be. Many of the outlets just seem to lie repeatedly, whether it's coverage of Donald Trump, whether it's COVID or Joe Biden's health. CNN's Jake Tapper is now somehow going to be profiting from his book Original Sin, which details Biden's mental decline. Now, this is a bit about what his book actually goes into, including George Clooney's encounter with the president at a fundraiser in LA.
One of the shocking things that we learned at a June fundraiser in Los Angeles, George Clooney was stunned when President Biden appeared to not recognize him. The president was saying, hi, hi, hi. He walked over to George Clooney. The aide says, you know George. And Biden said, yeah, hi, how you doing? And George Clooney attempted small talk. But according to people in that little clutch, it was very apparent that Biden did not recognize George Clooney, one of the most recognizable faces in the world, and somebody he'd known for decades and somebody that was throwing this fundraiser for him.
So this is what we're hearing from Jake Tapper now, but can we just take a look back at his comments while Joe Biden was in power?
Is very clearly a cognitive decline.
Okay.
That's what I'm referring to. It makes me uncomfortable.
You have no. It's so amazing. It's so amazing to me that
and try and figure out an answer.
A cognitive decline.
President Biden embraces his stutter, talking about it, while Trump mocks it, exaggerates it, belittles it. He's sharp physically. I mean, mentally. Yeah. I think the question is physically, right? You have questioned President Biden's age, mental fitness, ability to lead. Of those supporting Biden, you said, quote, shame on all of you pretending everything is okay. You're leading us and him into a disaster. Do you worry that you damaged him at all? I don't doubt that you got hugs and handshakes behind closed doors today. False claims to the Wall Street Journal about President Biden's mental fitness.
I mean, how is it that Jake Tapper is now selling a book, he's going to be making profits about Joe Biden's mental decline after spending years covering it up?
Well, if this doesn't wake up the American people and how much they've been lied to by mainstream media, then I don't know what will. I mean, this is proof in the pudding. You have it right here. I mean, this just goes to show you, and it wasn't just the liberal media hiding so many of his cognitive decline. It was other politicians. It was Pelosi. It was Adam Schiff. It was so many other American politicians that were lying to make Biden look so much better. So, you have to ask, what else are they lying about? What else did they lie about? And this goes for liberal mainstream media as well. What else are they lying about? Now, as you know, I was part of mainstream media for 15 years on CBS News in Los Angeles. And it got to the point where when I was covering COVID, I was like, we are lying to the American people. I couldn't do it anymore. So, we have folks like myself and other people who speak out, but this is on a much bigger scale, reaching much more people. And this needs to wake up the American people. What's the future of journalism at this point, and politics? How many more lies can the American people accept? Because there should be anger amongst the American people on both sides of the aisle, particularly those who were pro-Biden and wanted him to run a second term.
Absolutely. It's absolutely outrageous that Jake Tapper is now selling a book about Biden's decline after spending years and years convincing the American people that there was, nothing to see here, even though if you're playing along closely and watching Joe Biden closely, you could see the decline for yourself. But we have to talk about the future of the Democrats, what a mess that party is at the moment. And the question is, who's going to run for the Democratic Party in 2028? And there's speculation around Pete Buttigieg. He's Biden's former transportation secretary, and he's spoken at a town hall in Iowa. He said the Dems are not in a position to wallow in hindsight. Here's a bit more of what he had to say.
The vast majority of people in this country understand that what makes America America is that the American people bow to no king.
More anti-Trump rhetoric in there. But what do you think? Has he got a good chance? I suppose when you look at the others, there's still the option of Kamala Harris or someone like Gavin Newsom.
Oh, well, so look, I think AOC's up there as well. I think she has a lot of people to run. Sure, run. Go ahead. They are radicalized, and I don't think they have a shot at winning. I do think that Pete, there's a very good chance that he is going to be a front runner in 2028. But they're radicalized liberals. I don't even know if I'd call them Democrats at this point. So I don't know how far they would go. The Democratic Party is in such a disarray right now. I think that they have way too many chefs in the kitchen, or cooks in the kitchen, whatever that saying is right now.
Yeah.
And I think they're trying to figure it out, but they're having a really difficult time in doing so. I think that they can all agree on one thing, that no matter what Trump does, even if it's what they suggested or if it's what they've done in the past, they spin it somehow and are just going to poo-poo on Trump. It's so ridiculous. So in 4 years, thankfully we have another 4 years of Trump. We're still in the beginning of this, but in 2028, it's going to be so interesting to see what's going to happen in American politics.
Absolutely. And finally, there's been some chaos at Capitol Hill today during a hearing where RFK Jr. was testifying about how the health agency's 2026 budget aligns with Trump's agenda. Now, RFK Jr. did not even finish his opening statement when climate protesters made a scene.
The budget I'm presenting today supports these goals and reflects...
RFK Jr. also took on the Democrat members of Congress, reminding them of what Maha has been able to achieve in just 100 days.
Anybody thinks that we did gold standard medicine in this country from these institutions, look at our children. They're the sickest children in the world. Laura, you say that excuse me, Congressman DeLauro, you say that you've worked for 20 years on getting food dye out. Give me credit. I got it out in 100 days.
I'll give you that credit.
All right, so let's work together and do something that we all believe in, which is have healthy kids in our country, for God's sake.
Ms. Dean.
Do that together. It's not, there's no such thing as Republican children or Democratic children. There's just kids, and we should all be concerned with them.
And he absolutely deserves credit with what he's been able to achieve in a short time with his agenda to make America healthy again. Brittany, can I get your reaction to what happened at Capitol Hill today?
Yeah, so I mean, I can talk about this for hours because I have gone down the rabbit hole for years now about the chemicals that are in our food in America. The FDA allows chemicals in our food that's banned in 50 other countries around the world, including China. What is in our foods is absolutely despicable and disgusting. It shouldn't, he's absolutely right, and shouldn't be about Republican versus Democrats. I'm not sure what the heck the problem is, why the liberals and the Democrats want to continue to allow all of these chemicals in our foods. We see Australia, all over Europe. We see you guys not putting these same chemicals, Canada, in our foods. Why are we? No, it's possible. Why do we allow it? It's utter disgusting. And the irony of a Ben and Jerry's person who got up, an ice cream person, that it's filled with so many preservatives anyway. The irony of that heckler doing what he or she did. I mean, it's such BS. I don't. What are they heckling about? This man's trying to make our food healthier for you, for me, for their kids, for your grandparents, your parents. What's the problem here? Like, this is a nonpartisan issue. Like, I don't understand why are you having protesters in this type of meeting? What are they trying to prove and solve by RFK Jr. trying to eliminate preservatives and make our food cleaner? Like, shouldn't we all be agreeing to this? I don't know. And he's right. The diseases, the sicknesses, the autoimmune diseases that we're seeing in children, all based off the food and dyes and stuff that is allowed in our food. That's not allowed over in Australia.
Yeah, I know. I think Americans should be pretty grateful that they've got RFK Jr. in this position as a health secretary. But Brittany Hopper, we have to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us on Power Hour. It was so good to talk to you again.
Thank you, sweetie. Thank you so much.
We're going to have a break from politics and the news cycle for something very special. Sarah Grynberg is a top-rated podcast host, journalist turned mindset coach, keynote speaker, and author whose book Living a Life of Greatness is out now. And Sarah joins us in the studio. Sarah, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you so much for having me.
And congratulations on launching your book Living a Life of Greatness. Why did you want to write it?
So I've had my podcast, A Life of Greatness, for 6.5 years now. And as you mentioned, worked as a mindset coach for many years. And through my own experiences, I found that there were these key pillars to leading a great life. And I thought, well, it's time. A lot of the audience from A Life of Greatness said you should write a book. And I thought, you know what? It's time now to put all of my learnings and my teachings into something written. So that was the reason that I put the book together.
So for someone hearing this concept, life of greatness, for perhaps the first time, what exactly does that mean, and what does a life of greatness look like?
So a life of greatness looks different to all of us. But what I say within the book and my own teachings is that everything that we need is inside of us already. But because of the noise of the world and people saying that we could never do this or you're not good enough to do that, we kind of lose that spark and that fire that we're born with. And we find a lot of the time that we're far away from that innate greatness that we always have. And a life of greatness, I believe, is coming home to what we always had inside of us and rediscovering it. And within the book, I write the key pillars on what I believe is what one needs to live a great life.
And one of the chapters I know is embracing authenticity.
Yes.
How do you know if you are living a life that is really aligned with your authenticity? What are kind of the things you should be looking out for? And then how do you get to that point if you kind of realise that something is not in alignment with you? How do you check in and then make a shift?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think living an authentic life is living a life that you want to lead rather than a life that other people want you to lead. And I think what's kind of common with a lot of a lot of people, and especially within the work I do as a mindset coach, is they'll say, for example, they could have been a teacher or something like that. They wanted really to be a teacher. They got these amazing marks in school, and so their parents were like, you should be a lawyer. So then they went off and studied law. They have this life and they're unhappy because they're not living the life that they wanted to live. Or you hear stories about a lot of women not being able to maybe have their voices used as much as they would like to because it's being drowned out by their husband, or they're being subservient to what their husband wants and not living authentically to them. And I think when you really take time out to think about what makes me tick, what makes, purpose and authenticity quite aligned together. Where do I want to go with my life? What do I want to do? And then in those kind of silent moments, you hear the whispers of the things that you believe will bring you joy. And a lot of the time too, you can really go back to those childhood years and think about what you loved to do then and what were the things. It might have been creative, it might have been something to do with arts or sciences that you really loved, and go back and revisit that and start living what is authentic to you.
It's so interesting, and it's such good advice, I think, for anyone to go back to the childhood years. I think back to when I was 12 years old and my dream job was to be a TV presenter.
Really?
So, honestly,
wow.
It's very good.
Well, you knew straight up.
Yeah.
And mine was I loved entertainment, and I always knew from a young age that I wanted to be in entertainment. And so, I got there in a roundabout way, but I always stayed true to myself and my authenticity by being in that kind of field.
So you were in entertainment, you had a hugely successful media career, dream job producing top-rated breakfast radio programs. Was it scary to kind of take a leap away from what you had built to go down this path?
So I was obviously, as you mentioned, I worked as a producer and in breakfast radio for a period of time, and I got completely burnt out with the long hours, 3 a.m. wake-ups. And I had a 2- and 4-year-old at the time. And through that burnout is when I discovered self-improvement work, personal development. And within that, I really started embodying everything I was learning. And after a while, I realised that job on the outside looked really good. It was paying really well, and it was something I had thought that I wanted. And then I realised I had done no inner work, and when I started to do the inner work, that it wasn't at all what I wanted. And I wanted to do something that would give back more and that I thought would be more meaningful. And I moved into podcasting and then came up with the idea for my podcast. And it's interesting because doing the podcast, A Life of Greatness, fulfilled me so much when I saw how much other people were getting from it. And that kind of ties into this idea of service, and why, even if it's just in the smallest acts, when we help others on their journey, we are fulfilled in the most beautiful way, and that lights us up and brings us so much joy. So it wasn't as hard as what you think it would be, because I really felt that I was at a point where I was so burnt out and I was moving into another role that was more for me, that I could be of service.
I absolutely love that, and it's admiring to see what you do, and it's no doubt inspiring others to kind of look within themselves and maybe make changes, big or small. And I have to ask, being a top podcast host, you've interviewed Matthew McConaughey, you've interviewed John Howard, you've interviewed Esther Perel, you've interviewed Andrew Huberman, Deepak Chopra. I mean, what are some of the things that you've learned having been able to spend a fair bit of quality time with these really inspiring people?
Yeah.
What's something that you've taken away from speaking to all of them?
One thing I've really learned is that we are honestly all the same, in the sense that we all want to be heard and we all want to be listened to and seen. And I think that's a really powerful thing, because we put people on pedestals and we think, oh, they're a famous actor or a famous writer or whatever it is. But they really very much have the same inner turmoil that the everyday person does. And that is one thing I realised, that we're all human. And then the other thing that they have said, like other pearls of wisdom, would be, stay in your own lane. And when I've heard that it's more so in the sense that don't look at what everyone else is doing and get upset that you're not there yet, right? Stay in your lane and do the best work that you can. Look to others for inspiration, but stay in your lane and don't get distracted, because there will always be someone that is doing bigger things or something in your mind that you think is better, and that can be upsetting. But when you really just focus on you and being the best version of yourself, then you'll see that you'll be able to give as much as possible. And I think about that a lot, because I think a lot of us kind of look at others and might compare ourselves, and that comparison can be a really tricky area and can really get us down. But I think if we're really focusing on being the best versions of ourselves and doing the best work that we can, then we will find what we need. And I think that's the most important thing.
Do you find that also kind of translates to your work as a mind coach, a mindset coach? So you're coaching people who are athletes, who are senior executives. Do you find that many people have the same kind of challenges?
Yes, absolutely. It's interesting. As you said, I coach a lot of executives and business owners who, have these top jobs, and you think that they would know everything, which they do. They're very smart. But one thing that gets them is the mind.
Right.
It's the ruminating thoughts, is the thought of failure, the thought that I'm not good enough. All these people have the same things. And through my book, and I talk about conscious awareness, is the idea that we need to be very conscious of the thoughts that we think, the words that we say to ourselves and to others, and our actions. And I teach a lot of them how to do that, because I think that negative narrative in the untrained mind is the thing that can run absolutely wild. And we need to be able to train our minds to be able to live the greatest life. The mind is the most important thing. And if we don't have that in check, then nothing can go wrong. But we could create all of this misery just by the things that we think.
How do you find it now? You've done so much work. You're putting out such amazing work to uplift and inspire others so that they can, harness the best life for themselves. Do you find it now? Because you've launched this book. Do you still get challenges? Do you feel like you have to kind of check in with yourself with some of the work that you've studied and put out?
Absolutely. I always go back to the things that I teach, and I use them in my everyday life every single day.
Yeah.
So, the way that I teach people about conscious awareness and the thoughts that we think and how to get out of a ruminating spiral. One thing that I'll teach people quickly is, if we have a negative thought, it's already there. What do we do with it? And I say, replace it with a better feeling thought. And the way that you do it is knowing already what your better feeling thought will be. So that could be anything that brings you joy. It might be a family member or a dog or a place that you love to go. But think of that same thing every single time. So when the negative thought comes up, you're not scrambling, right? You know what the better feeling thought is. And we know through neuroplasticity, the more that we do this, the more that we rewire our brain from negative to positive. So you might need to do this 50 to 60 times a day when you first start, but then it becomes second nature. So I'm always doing things like that. If I ever have ruminating thoughts, I'm always using the techniques that I teach people about how to get out of those thoughts. I'm in deep meditation every single day, because I know that by going into meditation, it's slowing my brain waves down. And by slowing my brain waves down in my eyes open life, I'm better when I respond to things. And if something negative comes up, I don't jump and get really angry, because when I've done meditation, it's given me the time to, okay, I can respond to this with more clarity rather than anger. Those are all the practices plus more that I use every single day. And that's why I believe it's so important to know these things, because it just allows you to have a really, really great life. And I wasn't like that before. I got into this work because I had a mind that went at 100 miles an hour, and I was constantly overthinking and constantly worrying. and it was making my life hell. Like nothing was happening on the outside to do that, but I was in so much turmoil on the inside. And so I needed these tools to be able to lead a life that was far more calming and great. And it honestly is life-changing. And that's why I was like, I've got to teach everything that I know to other people as well.
For someone who might find themselves in a similar situation to what you were in, I think one of the questions they might want to ask is how long does it take? You know, everyone, I suppose, wants a quick fix. But what would your advice be, I think, to someone that is in that position? They're seeing you now, you know, such a bright light. What's their journey ahead? What does it look like?
So if we do these practices every day, like watching our thoughts, watching the words that we say, watching our actions, get into meditation. It can be 10 to 15 minutes, you know, most days, at least 5 days a week. If we're doing these sort of things, you know, working out what our purpose is, treating people with kindness, that's a chapter in my book. No joke, it doesn't take long. You know, for me, I think it took maybe 3-4 months to really start seeing changes. The thing is, as you said, people love a quick fix. And in personal development, we say you've got to do the work. Yeah. Right? And the work is continuous. Like you asked me, do I do this stuff? Still, of course I do. Yeah. Because if I didn't, my mind would still race. We are wired to be more negative than we are positive. And so when you see what I say is like the breadcrumbs from the universe, when you see these great things start changing in your life because you're taking all these things into account that I mentioned, it makes you want to keep doing it. When you know how to control your mind and you're living in harmony and peace, of course you want to be able to do it more. And doing this work means it's an everyday thing, but you live with so much more clarity. And that not only touches you and makes you happy, it touches the lives of everyone around you. And honestly, who doesn't want that?
Of course. Sarah, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us here on Power Hour, and congratulations on launching your book, Living a Life of Greatness. It is out now. And how can people follow you and stay up to date with the work that you're doing?
I'm on Instagram at Sarah Grynberg. I have a YouTube channel that's also Sarah Grynberg. My podcast is A Life of Greatness. And my book, Living a Life of Greatness, is at any good bookstore, and online you can purchase it, and also the audiobook.
Love it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Kim Kardashian has testified in a Paris courtroom as the trial over her 2016 robbery continues. Riley Sullivan is a lifestyle reporter here at skynews.com.au, and he's always across the latest celebrity headlines. Riley, great to see you.
Great to be back.
Kim Kardashian has appeared in Paris to testify in her infamous jewellery robbery case. What exactly did Kim have to say, and what's the update on the case?
Yes, so this case has finally gone to court. Kim was there in Paris. Her mother, Kris Jenner, was also there supporting her. As she gave testimony in Paris, she took to the stand. She described the moment when this gang really of armed men broke into her hotel room. They held her at gunpoint. She feared for her life. It was terrifying. But it was also an opportunity for her to confront the men who were in the courtroom. These were the armed men that for years, you know, there was theories and rumours about this case. And it's actually quite a bizarre story. You know, it's not, I guess, what people would maybe imagine a gang of criminals, you know, targeting a celebrity would be. They were quite elderly men. They were sort of these bumbling elderly Frenchmen who robbed her. She also used her time in court as an opportunity to say that she forgives the men. She said that it changed her life, it changed her outlook. It was interesting, she talked about how it made her basically less materialistic going through this and being robbed of millions of dollars of jewels, including her engagement ring from her now ex-husband, Kanye West. But it was sort of, you know, very symbolic as well, because when she arrived in court, she was wearing another multi-million-dollar necklace. So I kind of felt, you know, that was almost a symbol in itself, that she was saying, you know, you can do this to me, you've done this to me, but you're not going to change who I am. She's still Kim Kardashian, she's still glamorous. I thought she showed a lot of courage to be there, especially in a foreign country. You know, she's travelled from her home in America specifically to appear in court. I thought it was very brave.
Very brave, very powerful, and also to forgive people involved. Credit to her, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, Sean Diddy Combs' federal sex trafficking trial is underway. He's charged with 5 counts, including sex trafficking by force. Now, he denies all the allegations. Now, Diddy's ex-partner, the singer Cassie, has returned to the stand. What did she have to say?
Well, this has just sort of been harrowing. I mean, hearing the testimony from Cassie, she was Diddy's longtime partner, describing what she went through. It was years of sexual abuse. It was assault by men hired by Diddy, sex workers hired by Diddy. The jury was shown graphic evidence, video evidence of the acts, sexual acts. They were way too graphic to be shared by the media, but the jury has seen them. Cassie, again, is a woman who showed incredible bravery describing these events. She's now moved on with her life. She's married. She's, I guess in a way, she's moved on, but how could you move on from something like this? I think she is the star witness in this case. I think that it's definitely changed the perception because, Cassie in her own right is a very glamorous person, a celebrity. We don't expect to see them in a courtroom talking about being the victim of sex trafficking. I also think that there's probably a lot of people in Hollywood, frankly, who are nervous, not that they were necessarily involved, but through their association with Diddy, he was really at the top of this Hollywood circle for decades. So I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who are, maybe nervous that they could be subpoenaed or that they might be involved in some sort of tangential way to this case. Cassie's been on the stand for 2 days. I think that this will form really the centre of the prosecution's case, but I do think that there's probably a lot more to come, unfortunately, in terms of details.
Yeah, well, thank you for bringing us up to speed and just recapping that at this stage, Diddy denies all of the allegations. He's charged with 5 counts of sex trafficking, including sex trafficking by force. But I want to get to some royal news. A shocking new poll has revealed that Meghan Markle is now less popular in the UK than ever. What's Meghan's current approval rating and what caused this latest dip in public opinion, do you think?
Yeah, so, I mean, in the UK, there's sort of, it's almost a constant. There's incessant polling of the public to sort of see what the support's like for the monarchy, for particular members of the royal family. It's a constant thing. It's done every quarter. So Meghan Markle has been polled in these polls for over 7 years now, and you can see that there's a very dramatic shift in her opinion ratings from early on when she started dating Harry. It was on the rise. It peaked at the wedding in 2018. Of course, it was this beautiful royal wedding. Of course, that was a positive time for the royal family and for Meghan with the public. And it absolutely has just collapsed since 2020. So basically over the past 5 years, she's been hovering around the 20 to 30% mark. Actually, we were tracking it at Sky in 2023, and she kind of went through a period for about 6 to 8 months where she was relatively quiet, and that was actually, it peaked a little bit, it went back up. And I think the theory was that the less the public is seeing Meghan in public talking, complaining about the royal family, cashing in, doing these things that rub people the wrong way. When she doesn't do that, the ratings start to climb back up again. But obviously in recent months, she's back on the trail, the publicity trail. She's got the cooking show, she's got her product line. And again, I think in the UK, it just doesn't, gel with the public. I think the British public are very sensitive about any time when the royal family looks like they're cashing in. Even though she's not a working royal, she's still included in these polls, and it's a headache, it's a problem. I will say the same polls showed that Kate and Will are more popular than ever. They're both hovering around 75%, which is fantastic. I mean, even King Charles is only at about 60%.
Right.
So definitely that's a positive from these latest polls, because it shows that the future of the monarchy in the UK seems pretty solid. But I think with Meghan, the trick is the less she's out there, the more people like her.
The less she speaks.
Right.
But when you've been caught trashing the royal family, I think people don't like it, and the polls show that. But that's a great indication that William and Catherine still going strong.
Yeah.
Now, the royal member Zara Tindall has finally spoken out about the monarchy's feud with her cousin Prince Harry. What did Zara have to say?
Yes, so Zara Tindall is, again, like all the other members of the royal family, very, very private about these issues with Harry. It's very one-sided. It has been really up until this point. If you think about it, we've had the Oprah Winfrey interview. Harry's done subsequent interviews, most recently for the BBC, talking about this estrangement directly. We've never really had that from the royal family, but Zara Tindall was at an event last week in the UK where she was asked some questions by the audience, and she sort of, I guess in a roundabout way, did chime in on Harry. She kind of said that, look, we're a family like any family. We go through challenges, but she also said that they support each other. I think that's probably all we may ever know from the royal family side, because they do not talk about these kinds of things directly. So I think even Zara saying that, it was such a small statement, but in a way a huge statement, because it's an acknowledgement, I think, of the rift, which is what people have really sort of taken notice of. It's also Zara Tindall's birthday today, so happy birthday to
Zara Tindall.
44. But yeah, you know, I think that she handled it well. I think she acknowledged it, but she also sort of went straight back to saying, look, we're a family, we're a unit. She paid a lovely tribute to her grandmother, Queen Elizabeth. And yeah, you know I'm a fan of Zara Tindall.
Of course, of course. Now, Princess Catherine looked very fabulous in a stylish Victoria Beckham suit during a royal engagement this week, but some fans are convinced that she might be sending a secret message to the Beckhams. What's all this about?
Yeah, well, this is another interesting parallel kind of story where, you know, the Beckham family, who are in many ways the unofficial sort of celebrity royal family in some ways in the UK, they're going through their own turmoils. You know, there's rumours, allegedly, that there's a falling out between their eldest son, Brooklyn, his wife, Nicola Peltz, and the Beckham family. That has sort of come up again in recent weeks, allegedly after some absences, including at David Beckham's bash, big 50th birthday bash. And people think that maybe Kate is sort of sending a bit of support because, you know, they're both, in a way, going through these sort of family feuds. She wore this stunning olive Victoria Beckham suit, very stylish. And she does wear a lot of Victoria Beckham, I will say. This isn't the first time she's worn one of Victoria's designs, but I think it was, the time of it, I think, was a bit of a message of support, because we know that the Beckhams have been very supportive of the royal family. They've really doubled down on that in the last 18 months. So I think that this is sort of a mutual thing. It's kind of like, I see you, I respect you, I know what you're going through. And she looked fantastic.
Yeah, she absolutely did. Now, royal insiders are claiming that Prince William is already making plans to sideline the Sussexes when he becomes king. Now, what's prompted Will to act, and could the Sussexes actually be banned from Will and Kate's coronation?
Right. Well, this has cropped up again, essentially, because a royal insider called Hugo Vickers has spoken out. He's spoken to sources directly inside the palace. And we knew this. We know that William has been furious about the Sussexes' antics. He's taken a much harder line than King Charles has, and we know that he was outraged about when he found out that Meghan's still using the HRH title recently. That really allegedly infuriated the Prince of Wales. And the theory is now that he will be taking steps from day dot, basically, when he becomes monarch. And the first step could be excluding them formally from the coronation. Obviously, William didn't have a hand in the King's coronation, and of course Harry was invited to that. He attended. He wasn't in the front row, he was in the third row with the sort of extended family members, but he was there. But the idea now is that once the crown moves to William, it's not necessarily, there's no real precedent necessarily for having Harry there. There's actually a precedent where the Duke of Windsor was excluded from his brother's coronation. So there's actually, you know, William would be totally justified in not inviting Harry at all, which is quite shocking when you think about, there was a time not that long ago when Harry, Meghan, Will and Kate were considered the future of the royal family.
Yes.
I think that is absolutely never going to happen. I think now it's William and Kate, their family, and maybe, you know, some of these other cousins. But I think that Harry and Meghan, when Will takes the throne, are going to be history.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. Riley Sullivan, thank you so much for joining us on Power Hour.
Thank you.
And that is Power Hour. Thank you for your company. We'll see you next week. Make sure you subscribe to Sky News Australia on YouTube.